Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater. Nick Bowcott and I have been having some fun here.
Yep, the good old Soldano X88-IR.
The IR version. Now, we both date back early enough to remember what a thing the X88 was when it first came out.
Yeah, I remember it well.
Yeah, and you're going to talk to Mike Soldano later about some of the history of where the original version of this came out in the late 80s, correct?
Yeah, and why it came up to be as well, which is really cool. It's a great story.
Yeah, absolutely. And who better to tell the story than Mike himself?
Yeah, exactly.
But what we have today is the new release, the new version of the X88, the IR, which of course that IR tells us something right away there, that this has been distinctly modernized, if you will.
And it's fun, man. It's got, it's basically, it's an SLO in a box. It's a preamp, but it's got 3 channels, 3 completely independent channels. Every control goes to 11, so that's a plus.
Yeah.
Most importantly, apart from the Soldano, the cascaded gain that made those amps so unique and still does to this day, 412AX7, so it feels really good, and that to me is a big part, and that's how the intro came to be actually, and I blame it partly on Pete Thorne. He was here last week, and he's just such an inspiration, and he does a lot of like demos where he composes something. And I took this into my studio, and before I knew it, I'd recorded something with 5 guitars, so I brought it in here and did it because it shows off what the unit can do. But with me though, everything was crunched apart from one tiny little lead thing, so hopefully you'll show off the cleaner.
We've got the high gain demo. I'll be doing a little lower gain stuff a little bit later, but that actually brings me to a point about this, is that the original had 3 channels.
Right.
This has 3 channels, and each of those channels have 2 modes.
Exactly.
And so there are actually 6 distinct different channels, if you will, inside this. Plus each of them can feed a separate IR, and there are 6 different IRs that can be loaded. Of course, you could load any number that you want. There are 6 slots to load them into in this as well. And so you've got a huge range of tones that are available to this. And a big part of it for me when I plugged it in and sat down with it is that it's just inspiring to play through. It feels right and it sounds right.
Yeah, I literally got carried away. Plus, like you said, like you've got crunch and OD on the two dirtier channels, if you will. The clean has an alt, which Mike explains has something to do with the late great Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Stevie Ray mode.
And a mod he did. Fat switch, bright switches. And like you said, and it's also got a really good power amp emulation built within it as well, and you can mess with that on the app, and I know you're going to be talking about that later with the high-pass filter and all that sort of good stuff.
Yep, certainly. Headphone output, which I don't think there was a headphone on the original, was there?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Plus, I like the fact, this is silly, but the fact it's got the inputs on the back as well. So if you are going the Rackmount route, that's the way to go. But for the studio, this is great because I'm an old codger. Like you said, I remember when this first came out, all the fuss it created, and justifiably so. And I remember when the SLO came out as well for the same reason. And the thing I love about this is it's very familiar. It's got tubes in it, as I said, 412X7s. It's got control, so I can just sit there in the studio, turn a few knobs, press a few buttons, pick the IR I like. I'm not even looking at names. I'm going, that sounds good. Yep. Go. And like you said, it's inspiring. And that, to me, is the mark of a good piece of equipment, be it a pedal, be it a guitar, be it a pickup, be it a device like this. If it makes you want to play, and before you know it, you blink your eyes and it's like, 3 hours later, I better start working on the actual video itself. That's a good indication that the unit is a fine thing. Plus, it's purple.
It's purple, yeah. Some other features we should point out: there is a mono out stereo in, effects loop on the back.
Yep.
There are dual outputs, so there's an XLR output that carries the IR signal.
Stereo, no doubt.
Stereo, yeah, exactly. And then there are 1/4-inch outputs that you could use to feed a power amp on stage, or speaker cabs, or whatever you want to do with that. So you have 2 distinct outputs. Again, I mentioned that headphone out that wasn't on the original. And we've also got a MIDI in and out on this as well.
Right.
And so it'll integrate right into your stage setup. You can store most of the switch settings in here, and there also are some extra features that are available in the app that you can also store and recall via MIDI. But not just program changes, you can also use control change messages to affect some of those parameters in real time. Now, you can't store the knob settings, but most of the other settings will call back up. And you can also, we actually discovered this hidden feature, if you press and hold, you saw that flash there, the current state of the unit is now saved. So if we take this on stage, it'll come right back where it was when we set it up. So you don't have to find your settings.
Which is a good thing to have.
Yeah, so that, I mean, ideal for studio, obviously, great for stage use. It'll integrate into a very complex rig, but you can also just plug in and jam through it for a practice session, or in the studio or at home or whatever.
And the great thing too is because of its, the IR nature of it, silent stages. This is
Yeah.
Also another use. So.
Right, right, and you can bypass the IRs, by the way.
Yeah,
so if you
so as well,
popped it
yeah.
over, so you could use this as a straight tube preamp going into your power amp or whatever you wanted to do with it as well. Well, you gave a good demo of some of the heavier sounds with it, cleaner sounds.
Right.
You got some tracks happening there with that. Let's take a look at a few of the lower gain sounds, and we'll do that in the context of taking a tour of the accompanying app for this. So let's jump over and take a look at that. Let's take a tour of the X88-IR as well as the app that goes with it. Now, you can do pretty much everything you need for a performance for in the studio right from the X88-IR itself. What the app does is give you an easy way to see all the parameters as well as access a few functions that are only available inside the app. And you can also see what's happening from a MIDI standpoint and so on. But if we take a quick tour over here, we have 3 channels. The bottom 2 channels are identical. They have crunch and overdrive modes, as we'll see. The top channel is, I guess what you'd say, the clean channel. So if we set that to the clean mode, we've got a gain control, 3-band EQ, as well as a channel output level. Now we have a master volume level for setting the overall level as well. Now there is a second mode on the clean channel as well, and as we'll see when Nick sits down with Mike Soldano, that actually grew from a conversation he had with Stevie Ray Vaughan. Now he calls it altered mode. So here's the regular mode, and here's an altered mode. Now that mode was set up to work for the single coil kind of sounds that Stevie Ray Vaughan wanted to hear, but it works great for a lot of different applications. It's got a little bit more of that American clean style tone to it, and a little bit more drive as well. Now we have a 3-position bright switch on this channel. In the middle, the bright is basically off. It's a normal setting. We have a bright setting up and down. So you can fine tune that to your liking. If we go to the second channel, again, we have 2 modes. We've got crunch mode, which we're in now. And if we hit the switch, we'll go to overdrive mode. You see that the LED changed to red there. Put that back to crunch. Now in addition, this channel has a fat switch as well as a bright switch. And with fat on, lots more lower mid-range there. And with the bright on, and of course we can have both on at the same time. A great tone. Go back to the overdrive setting. Now I'd like to point out that we're just at about 9 o'clock on the dial there, so we have a ton more gain available in both of those modes. So if we go down here, we have the exact same 2 modes. So really we have 2 identical channels. This lets us set up a clean, a crunch rhythm, a high gain, overdrive for leads if you want. You could have 2 overdrive channels, you could have 2 crunch channels in combination with either of the 2 clean modes. So a lot of versatility here. Again, we have that 3-band EQ, independent gain, and independent output level for each. But in addition to that, we can independently assign an IR to each of those channels as well. To take a look at this, let's head over to the app because we can see a little bit more clearly there. Now in the app, we have a representation of the unit itself. Now these controls are not memorized inside the app or controlled there, but we can select the channel here, and you can see that changing on the front panel of the unit as well. We can set the mode for each channel, and we can also bypass the IRs if we like. Now here on the left is where we've got some fun stuff happening. We've got a 3-position depth switch. Bring some resonance out of the cabinet in the lower mid-range and the low end. We've also got a 3-position presence switch here. So that lets us shape the top end as we like. In my opinion, 2 of the most important features here are the high pass and the low pass filtering. This is where you can really increase the realism of any IR-based unit actually, because you can shape the bottom end a little bit and shape the top end a little bit so that it's a little truer to what an amp would sound like with a mic on it, at least in my opinion. So in this case, we have a 3-position high pass switch. Now this is going to tame the bottom end so we don't get too much thump out of the bottom. The low pass is going to tame the top end. And that gets rid of a little bit of that upper end crackle, if you will, that you can sometimes have with digital units. Now this unit's very smooth on the top end, but having that extra shaping capability inside the app, which is controlling what's happening inside the unit, to me is a very powerful function. Now I talked about the 6 IRs, and those are right here. Now these are going to make a dramatic difference in what we hear. Let me get this low pass back where I wanted it. Presence and depth. Okay, so we have 6 different IRs available per channel. So everything from an open back 1x12, closed back 1x12, and 4 different 4x12s as well. And again, we can do that per channel. So if we jump over here to the second channel, say. Or the third channel, we can bump that up to the overdrive setting. So there's so much tone shaping available with the X88-IR, and certainly with the extra features that are in the app. The other thing that we can see here in the app is a list of the control change messages we can send over MIDI to change the parameters. So we can select the channel here, we can select the mode for each channel, IR bypass, we can also call up the different IRs, we can engage the low pass, the high pass, the depth, and the presence in any of their 3 settings as well. Now we can also save overall presets for all these features, and those are selected up here. Very easy to save as well. So you can jump right to those if you want, and we can select the MIDI channel that we're operating on. Omni sends it to all the channels simultaneously, or you can assign it to a particular MIDI channel if you want. Among the other features on the X88-IR are the mono out stereo in effects loop, as we mentioned. We've got a headphone on the front panel, we've got 2 sets of outputs, MIDI input and output on the back panel, so lots of different features, as well as of course the USB for connecting the X88-IR to your computer. So I hope you've enjoyed this quick tour of the X88-IR, but to give you more of the background, the story behind this unit, let's head over with Nick Bowcott to talk to Mike Soldano.
Right, as promised, you've just heard this. We've gone through a bunch of the features. More importantly, I'm joined by the man behind this wonderful purple beast here, Mr. Mike Soldano. So, Mike, thanks for joining us. This, I remember in 1990, I first heard of the X88-R. This, of course, being the X88-IR because of the IRs in it, which we'll get onto later. But I became aware of this in 1990 because of some guy called Steve Lukather, who's quite a good guitar player.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So pray tell the story behind the creation of, where was this born and why?
Okay, well, I was born in Hollywood, California, in my little shop on Melrose back in the day. Steve Lukather was one of my very first customers to buy an SLO 100. And he immediately incorporated it into his rack and his playing and all of it, everything that was going on. But the dream idea would be, since everybody in the late 80s was really into these refrigerator-sized racks,
double refrigerator,
full of effects processors and power amps, and everybody was going stereo. In fact, some guys were doing a dry signal up the middle and then left and right and all that. And so the whole idea would have been like, wouldn't it be great if we could just not have that 100-watt amp sitting there going into a dummy load, Right. And of course, kind of backing up a little bit, moving away from the X88 for just a second, when I originally designed the SLO 100, my whole idea was I wanted to build an amp that would sound good at any volume, which meant that I did not want to rely on the power tubes for any of that distortion or any of that compression or any of the sound. I wanted it to all be in the preamp, which I did, and I was successful at, which gave me the idea that we could easily build a preamp and eliminate the power section and still have that sound. And so there were some people who didn't believe that was possible. So basically, I built the very first X88-R on a bet, and I built it for Steve Lukather.
And who was the bet with?
Well, I won't say who the bet was with, but
it was a bet.
It was a bet, and
did you win?
And I won the bet because Steve went absolutely crazy for the amp and immediately went into his system, and he used it for many years. And so because of that, I realized there is a market for a standalone preamp, because so many, again, that was the era of the rack rig, you know.
Right.
So many people were going in that direction. And so I sat down and I decided to take what was originally just this hand-built one-off preamp and turn it into a production piece. And so I laid out the boards, chassis, the whole thing. And it was based around 3 basic sounds.
Right.
It was the SLO 100 normal channel in the clean mode,
Right.
SLO 100 normal channel in the crunch mode, and of course the overdrive. Of course. And those were the 3 channels of the original. And it was a very successful amp. I built one. I mean, I built a whole bunch of them, but Warren Cucurullo got one of the very first ones.
Right.
You'll remember him from Missing Persons,
Yeah.
and later Duran Duran. And Michael Landau,
Yeah, I heard of
major,
him.
you know,
Yep.
him, yeah, right. And just a slew of others. Warren DeMartini got one. I mean,
I think remember Peter Frampton telling me he had
yes,
one as
and
well.
Peter Frampton as well.
What a
So-
tone that man had too.
Yeah, right. And so it was a really great product. And at the time, it was probably the most advanced guitar preamp ever built, because up to that point, guitar, if there even were guitar preamps, they were these really weird little things that just weren't really all that amazing.
Well, because the bottom line is a lot of the preamps back then relied on the power amp for
Exactly.
the missing ingredient wasn't there. So,
wasn't there,
So
exactly.
you're getting the corn but not the flake. Did that make any sense? Probably didn't, but
No.
but you're only getting half the story, whereas this,
Yeah.
as you've said, you know, like the great thing about the SLO is the fact, apart from it sounding great, is that you can play it at a bedroom level
Yes.
and still get that feeling, because you're using
Yes.
the power amp purely as a magnifying glass as opposed to a tonal enhancer, if you will.
Exactly, and that was the whole idea behind this. And then it later, you know, as my, you know, ideas around it morphed further, a few years later, I came out with the X99 preamp, which was taking it even a step further, and that was inspired by seeing an automated mixing console
Right.
at Ocean Way Studios in LA, which was the first time I'd ever seen an automated board.
Right.
And they were like doing some playback thing, and I'm watching these faders going like this, and I'm like, that could work for a guitar amp. And so, unfortunately, at the time I had, and I still don't have, the engineering knowledge to design the robotics necessary to run motorized potentiometers.
Right.
But I met a guy who was very good at that, which was Tim Caswell. And Tim and I partnered up on that, and that's how the X99 happened. And now we've come even further with technology, which is why
This bad boy is, yeah.
we're doing this guy here.
Yeah, and I for one, I'm really glad this is here, because they was the original is the Holy Grail, which is kind of unobtainium. You can go on certain websites and pay stupid money for
They're
it,
going
like
for stupid money.
yeah, like a small house,
Yeah.
or this, or a car, or this.
Yeah.
But this one is great because, like, the original, if memory serves me correct, it had the 3 channels. This has 2 modes per channel. You've got a lot more switches. You've got fat and
Yes.
bright, as already discussed earlier, on the 2 bottom channels, and the top channel also has what you call the altered mode.
Yes. So what the altered mode is this is what, through folklore, etc., became known as the Stevie Ray Vaughan mod.
Right.
And the reason for that is because prior to Stevie's untimely passing, we had built an SLO 100 for Stevie. And one of the things I had done to that amp was put a mid-range scoop on the normal channel to sort of emulate more that kind of tone he was getting with
Yeah.
the Stratocasters.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and so you kind of want that kind of scooped mid, that sort of boosted bass thing, because that's kind of what the epitome of that Strat thing is.
Absolutely.
And so on the original, on that amp, on that very amp that we built, on the back of it, we put a switch that said normal and altered. And the altered was that mid-range scoop. And so we've taken that same scoop and we've built it into this amp, and that's why we use the same terminology on the
Right.
switch. So when you're in the green mode, that's a normal.
Normal, yeah.
Yes, that's the normal circuitry. When you go to the altered mode, it gets kind of yellow. It looks like a tweed
Yep.
amp covering if you look at it and stare at it long enough. And that's that
Stevie
mid-range.
Ray, yeah.
That's Stevie Ray. And
So
then
altered equals SRV, another
exactly,
word for
exactly.
yeah.
And you know, it's a really interesting sound, because especially if you're playing single coil pickups, this just makes a single coil bloom.
Yeah.
It just all of a sudden it's just got all that thing that you like about a single coil that makes it happen.
Brings it out.
Yeah.
The thing I love about this too is if we go to the bottom channel, you've got two modes. So you've got crunch
Yes.
and overdrive, which is perfect because some idiots like me, with I just want the overdrive on 9 and then 11, and
Right,
then
right.
so I can have one channel overdrive 9, one channel overdrive 11.
Yes.
At a different volume as well, which is wonderful.
Exactly.
And you've also put fat and bright in there as well, which is
Yeah.
great. And I like the way this has a three-way, like the clean
Yes. Mm-hmm.
has a three-way bright switch. You've got middle is off.
Middle's flat, and
and
then now
two
you have
different-
two different bright modes, which
Right.
in the original amp only had one bright
Yeah.
mode. And what's cool here, going back to this whole crunch and overdrive thing, is this amp is a lot more versatile than the original, because now
Way
if you
more.
want two overdrive channels or you
got
want
it.
two crunches,
You've got
like
it.
you were just saying, you want overdrive and overdrive with two different level settings. Now you can configure the amp any way you want to do it.
So I can already imagine mine will be SRV, altered,
Yeah.
overdrive on 9, overdrive on 11, thank you, good night. Plus
Yeah.
you've got the built-in IRs, which is amazing.
Yes.
Stereo
Stereo
XLRs out, headphones, and also, as discussed on the video, there's the app that comes with it. And this is an all-singing, all-dancing purple piece of beauty. So thank you for bringing back the Holy Grail. I much appreciate it.
Quite welcome.
And I will see you soon, my friend.
See you soon. Thank you.
Nick, fantastic interview with Mike.
Yeah, what a gentleman. He's a good storyteller as well, because he
Yeah.
was there. I mean, he was hanging out with the likes of all the names he mentioned.
Yeah.
And he changed things. He's up there, in my opinion, with the Jim Marshalls of this world in the amplifier industry, the Pete Diesels,
Yeah.
the Dave Friedmans. Like, his name. So when you see Soldano, you know it's going to be serious.
Yeah, absolutely. The original X88 was such a landmark when it came out as a 2 preamp in the days of those big refrigerator-sized
Yeah.
racks and things. But now, with the way that studios, we're using things in the studio, the way we're taking things on stage, you mentioned earlier the silent stage thing. This is just such an ideal solution for that, and it can cover so much ground tonally.
Yeah, and like I said, I love the fact you just turn a few knobs, select an IR if it sounds good, hit
Go.
record and you're off. And that to me is the name of the game. I don't like deep diving through multiple menus. The creative process should be quick and simple, and this to me it's like a pair of good old shoes.
That's what it does.
Yeah.
That's what it does. Awesome. Thanks for sitting down with me today. Appreciate
pleasure.
taking a look at this with you. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. And thank you for joining us. If you want more information on the X88-IR or any of Soldano's products, head over to sweetwater.com, or better yet, contact your Sweetwater sales engineer. They've got all the answers for you. For Nick Bowcott, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater.
See you.